Hi, and welcome to Us Unfiltered, a podcast that shares raw, personal experiences to help you cope with mental health issues. I'm your host, Adrienne Selena, and today we're diving into the topic of anxiety. But let's have a quick disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice. This podcast and any information is not to be used as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychiatric, or mental health care. We recommend that you seek the advice of your doctor or other qualified health providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health issues. Okay, so today we're diving into the topic of anxiety. This is something I can speak to personally as I've dealt with anxiety since childhood and struggled with it significantly in my 20s. It's been a journey of working through it and managing it. Today, I'll share some examples of how I've recognized and dealt with anxiety, and we'll also explore what anxiety is, why it happens, and some coping mechanisms that might help you. I'll also provide ways for you to reflect on why you might be experiencing anxiety to address it at the source. Many people think that anxiety is just about having panic attacks or nervousness or a constant state of worry. But simply put, anxiety is the expectation of something negative about to happen. You feel it both mentally and physically. And when you're experiencing anxiety, your body responds and reacts to what your brain is telling it. So it often starts with physical components like an elevated heart rate, shortness of breath, sweaty palms, tightness in your chest. These are natural and common responses to potentially facing a negative situation. It's a fear response. However, before we get into examples and techniques, I want to clarify that experiencing anxiety does not necessarily mean you have an anxiety disorder. When the anxiety starts to interfere substantially with everyday activities, it can cross into the realm of a disorder, requiring a more hands on approach and a medical diagnosis. Individuals that are struggling with an anxiety disorder are likely experiencing excessive fear and worry. That can be either with a specific situation, or if we're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, it could be more of a broad range of everyday situations. But a lot of times, these experiences come with symptoms that are over an extended period of time, for example, lasting several months and sometimes even years. The symptoms of anxiety disorders can range, but frequently there'll be restlessness, irritability, trouble concentrating, making decisions, heart palpitations, trouble sleeping, having a sense of impending danger, doom, and panic. And a lot of times you'll see a cyclical sign of panic attacks. There are several different types of anxiety disorders, and it often involves persistent anxiety that is outsized and can feel out of control. And sometimes to the person experiencing it, it could feel like it doesn't make sense. So this disorder can significantly impact the daily life of someone who's experiencing it, making simple tasks like going to school or going to work or interacting with friends and family incredibly challenging. The complexities of an anxiety disorder need medical attention. So if this is you, I highly recommend reaching out to your healthcare provider so that you can get the additional support that you need. Before we dive into the tips and tricks for dealing with anxiety, I want to share a recent personal experience where I was feeling anxious and that helped me recognize the root cause. This example might sound a bit silly, but it's a great example of how you can analyze situations in your life to identify the root causes of your anxiety. A few weeks ago, I was on my way to a Jaguars NFL preseason game downtown. We missed our exit and had to take a roundabout way to get to the stadium, which ended up getting us stuck in traffic for about 40 to 50 minutes. What made it worse was that we were stuck in an exit lane with literally no way to back out, no way to move forward, no way to take a detour. We were genuinely stuck and it felt like forever. As we sat there, I could feel my heart rate increasing. My palms were getting sweaty. I had tightness in my chest. My breathing became more challenging and I was fidgeting a lot. And I voiced my anxiety to the passenger in the vehicle, and they reassured me that we would get to the game on time to see kickoff. I realized in that moment that my anxiety wasn't about being impatient or missing the game, even though I wanted to see kickoff. It wasn't about the money because I got the tickets for free. So I took a moment to reflect on why I was feeling so anxious. I knew that I wasn't in any danger and that we would eventually get to the game. So I asked myself a question that I learned through my own personal therapy. When did I first experience a feeling similar to this? Then it hit me. When I was a small child, there were people in my life who would sometimes torment me. I'm just going to call it what it is. And one of their methods was locking me in closets and leaving me there for sometimes a substantial amount of time. And they would call me these little nicknames like Lysa, locked in closet alive. They would sit outside the door singing their little song that taunted me while I was trapped in the dark, alone and afraid. And as I sat in the vehicle that day to the NFL game, I realized that it wasn't about being stuck in a line that scared me. It wasn't any kind of claustrophobia. It wasn't about impatience. The real fear was being trapped with no way out, no detour to take. And that's what was causing me to feel afraid and causing that anxiety. So, this reflection helped me understand that my anxiety was much more about feeling like I had no control to get out of this trapped situation. And recognizing this as allowing me to address the root cause of my anxiety and manage it better. I share this because when you experience sudden onset anxiety that almost feels inexplicable, in these moments, try to think back to a similar feeling from your past. Is there a childhood memory or a past experience that mirrors or mimics this feeling? If that answer is yes, that's likely why you're feeling this way. Take time to think through it and revisit it. Revisiting it is a form of prolonged exposure therapy, which we'll discuss lightly in this episode, but in more detail in another episode. It helps train your brain to recognize that you're not in a dangerous situation, so there's no need for a fear response. If you're experiencing anxiety and can't find a root cause, it might be that your brain genuinely feels fear. In such cases, you'll need to work on coping mechanisms, which I will get to later in this episode. But most of the time, anxiety stems from a past experience, and your brain is trying to warn you, hey, this is similar to something that has happened before. I'm going to make you feel scared because I'm anticipating a negative outcome. Anxiety at its core purpose, it's not a negative thing. It's a biological response. Our brain learns from life's highlight reel, recognizing patterns to keep us safe. So when your heart races and your palms get clammy, your brain is saying, hey, remember that other time? Yeah, let's not repeat that. It's like a mental sticky note. Like, caution, slippery, emotional slope ahead. Another example of this is like you're terrified of something seemingly harmless, like stuffed teddy bears. As a child, you may have had a terrifying nightmare about a stuffed teddy bear, and now you avoid them at all costs. And when you see them or when you think of them, your heart races, your palms get sweaty. So now picture a psychologist locking you in a room with a teddy bear. Initially, panic is going to set in. But as time passes and nothing harmful occurs, your mind adapts. The bear becomes less scary. That is exposure therapy in action. By gradually facing our fears, our brains learn to extinguish anxiety. So, next time you encounter a teddy bear moment where you're feeling sudden anxiety, think back to a similar time when this feeling maybe very first happened to you, and then try to revisit it, think through it several times. That's going to help your brain recalibrate to know that you are indeed safe and that you're not in a dangerous situation. That will help train that root cause of your anxiety to be less intense and less triggering to you over time. It is important to understand that while anxiety isn't preventable, it is highly treatable. There are numerous coping mechanisms and techniques available to help manage and soothe anxiety. And guess what? Anxiety and depression, they're like the Batman and Robin of mental health. And I don't say that to be cute or to be funny, and it's definitely not intended to be taken as a positive. What I mean by that is that anxiety and depression are very connected. They tend to be comorbid conditions. When anxiety throws a party, depression often RSVPs. They tag team, making symptoms worse. So if you're struggling with both, you're not alone. There are ways to tackle both anxiety and depression. So, we've talked briefly about examples on how anxiety manifests itself and why it happens, and the techniques of exposure therapy. So, let's talk about other easy tips and tricks to help cope with anxiety and also help cope with depression. Number one, this is an easy one: deep breathing. Practice deep, slow breaths to calm your nervous system. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 4, and exhale for 4. This is really going to help your nervous system relax and help with some of those triggers that you're feeling with the shortness of breath, the tightness in your chest. Number 2, limit caffeine and alcohol. I cannot stress this one enough, you guys. This is so important. As somebody who used to really struggle with substance and alcohol abuse, I can tell you that these things exacerbate anxiety. It makes it worse. You may think that it's helping in the moment, but it really does make it worse. Opt for herbal teas or water instead. Number 3, physical activity. It doesn't have to be vigorous exercise. Just go on a brisk walk or do some jumping jacks. Do yoga. Anything to get your body moving and help release those endorphins is really going to help promote that holistic well-being. Number 4, create an anxiety journal. Write down your anxious thoughts and explore their validity. Challenge them with evidence. A lot of times, what I like to do when I'm struggling with anxiety that feels almost inexplicable or doesn't make sense, I will write them down, and then I will literally write down the reasons as to why this anxiety is silly, if you want to put it that way. And then continue to reread this journal. This is going to help train your brain to challenge those anxious thoughts. Number 5, progressive muscle relaxation. A lot of times when you're feeling anxious, a good way to stay mindful and get into a more relaxed state is practicing muscle relaxation. So I like to lay down flat on my back, and then I go through my head all the way to my feet, tensing and releasing each muscle group in my body. And you can start with your hands. You could start from the head and the neck down to your toes, or you can start from your toes and work your way up. It's really however you prefer. This really does help make you more mindful in the moment and takes your mind off of some of those anxious thoughts. Number 6, mindfulness and meditation. Engaging in mindfulness exercises or meditation will really help you stay present and is proven to help reduce anxiety. There are tons of guided meditation exercises and guided mindfulness exercises that you can find online that will really help you with this. Number 7, positive self-talk. Question negative thoughts about yourself. Are they based in evidence? Replace them with more balanced perspectives. I really like to do this regularly. If I'm feeling myself being negative towards myself, speaking to myself harshly within my mind, I notice that it does increase my anxiety. So when I catch myself in those moments speaking negatively to myself, I immediately turn that thought into a positive thought about myself. And challenging your negative self-talk will also help with depression and help you stay in a more present state with yourself. Number 8, grounding techniques. Focusing on your senses is something that can really help you with mindfulness. So name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste. I know it sounds silly, but it does help reduce anxiety, and it makes you more aware of your own body. Number 9, social support. Talk to a friend or a loved one about your feelings. If you're struggling with anxiety and depression, please Talk to someone that you trust and that you love and that you know is going to be a support to you. Sharing can help alleviate anxiety, and it can also give you a safe space to feel supported. And lastly, and certainly not least, number 10, prioritize self care. This means getting adequate sleep, getting proper nutrition, making sure that you make time for relaxation, take breaks when needed. This is so important not only for your physical well being, but especially your mental well being. Remember, everyone's experience with anxiety is as unique as a fingerprint. So find out what works best for you, whether it's deep breaths, meditation, or talking to a friend. There are ways to help self soothe. And here's the scoop: no matter how many therapy sessions you attend or antidepressants that you may take, anxiety will still knock on your door occasionally. And guess what? That's 100% normal. It's okay to feel anxiety at times. It's your body and your mind saying, hey, watch out, something might go sideways here. But don't let your mind sprint off into the anxiety marathon. And hopefully, using these tips that I've shared with you will help cope and refrain that anxiety marathon. Before I sign off, please remember this: if you can swing it, seek professional medical help. Therapists are like the life coaches for your brain, so find one in your local area and give your mental health the treatment it deserves. Thanks for tuning in to Us Unfiltered. I'm your host, Adrienne Selena, and always remember, mental health matters, and so do you.